The rain poured heavily that evening, drumming against the old tin roof of our family mansion in Abuja. I stood by the tall glass window, watching the silver lines of water trace down the panes, feeling a storm brewing inside me that matched the one outside. My name is Zara, the second daughter of Chief and Mrs. Adekunle, owners of one of Nigeria's biggest construction companies. For as long as I can remember, my sister Tommy has been the golden child, the kind who glows even when she does nothing. When she spoke, people listened. When she smiled, the room seemed to shine. And when she failed, someone always cleaned up her mess. Me? I was the shadow that followed her light, invisible unless needed for comparison. It was the morning after her 28th birthday when everything changed. We were all gathered in the lavish living room, a space filled with gold-plated furniture and portraits of our ancestors staring down like silent judges. Tommy was still in her white silk robe, lazily sipping champagne, while I sat quietly beside her, scrolling through my phone to distract myself from the tension that always came with family meetings. Our father cleared his throat. "Tommy," he began with that familiar tone of pride, "your mother and I have decided that it's time you take your next step. You've worked hard helping me with the new branch in Ghana. So," he paused dramatically, then smiled, "we've transferred $5 million into your account. You deserve it." The glass nearly slipped from my hand. Tommy squealed, jumping up to hug both of them, tears of joy streaming down her face. My mother patted her back, her own eyes shining with pride. Then my father turned to me. "And you, Zara," he said, his expression turning serious. "You're 25 now. You've had enough schooling. It's time to earn yours." I blinked, unsure I'd heard correctly. "Earn mine?" "Yes," my mother chimed in, adjusting her diamond bracelet. "You're always reading, planning, thinking. Now it's time to do. We can't spoon-feed both of you. Your sister's gift was earned. You need to earn yours too." Their words cut deeper than I could show. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile that felt like glass cracking under pressure. Inside, something shattered. That night, while Tommy's laughter echoed from the garden where she celebrated with her friends, I locked myself in my room. I wanted to scream. $5 million. For her, the same sister who'd barely finished university because she was too busy chasing rich men in Lagos clubs. Meanwhile, I'd spent years working quietly, volunteering for NGOs, writing grant proposals, trying to start something meaningful on my own. But apparently, that wasn't earning enough for my parents. When I finally fell asleep, it was with tears soaking my pillow. Days turned into weeks. Tommy bought a new car, a silver Range Rover that sparkled like her ego. She started a fashion brand that was really just her posing in luxury clothes for Instagram. My parents applauded her entrepreneurship, while I sank deeper into silence. One Sunday afternoon, while everyone was out, I went to visit Grandpa. He lived on the family's ancestral estate, a quiet piece of land surrounded by thick palm trees and red soil. Grandpa was 84, sharp as a whip, and never afraid to call out hypocrisy, a trait that had made him clash with my father more times than I could count. When I arrived, he was sitting on the veranda, carving a piece of wood with his old knife. He looked up and smiled. "Zara, my quiet one. You came." I hugged him tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of palm oil and old wood. We sat for a while, talking about life, the world, and how unfair it sometimes felt. I didn't plan to tell him about what had happened, but somehow, the story spilled out between my tears. He listened silently, his wrinkled hands resting on his cane. When I finished, he chuckled softly. "Ah, your father has forgotten where he came from," he said. "He thinks money makes a person. But you, my dear, have something stronger, integrity." I wiped my eyes. "But integrity doesn't pay bills, Grandpa." He laughed again, this time louder. "True. But patience does. And sometimes, God lets us walk the hard road so that when we arrive, we know why we came." Then, leaning closer, he whispered, "Don't worry, Zara. Grandpa has his own plans." I didn't know what he meant then, but the twinkle in his eyes told me it was something big. The following weeks were strange. Grandpa started calling me more often, asking about my ideas, my dreams, my struggles. One evening, he even drove to my small apartment in his old pickup truck, something he hadn't done in years. "I want to see where my favorite granddaughter lives," he said with a grin. He stayed for hours, listening as I talked about the NGO I wanted to start, one that would help young women in rural areas learn practical skills. When he left, he handed me a small brown envelope. "For now," he said. "Use it wisely." Inside was 2 million Nigerian nairas. I cried, not because of the money, but because it came from love, not pity. Meanwhile, things in the main house began to shift. Tommy's fashion brand started crumbling. Orders weren't coming in, and rumors spread that her main investor, one of her ex-boyfriends, had pulled out. My parents grew worried but didn't say much publicly. Pride wouldn't allow it. I, on the other hand, used Grandpa's seed money to start my small initiative. I called it Women Rise. We trained young women in tailoring, soap making, and small business management. Within months, local media started covering our workshops. For the first time, I felt seen, not by my parents, but by people who truly mattered. Then one morning, everything exploded. I got a call from Grandpa's lawyer, Mr. Sani. "Zara, your grandfather has requested a meeting. It's urgent." When I arrived at his estate, my parents and Tommy were already there, sitting stiffly in the parlor. Grandpa looked weaker than usual, but his eyes were fierce. "I've called you all because it's time to talk about legacy," he began. "I'm old, and I won't live forever." My mother exchanged nervous glances with my father. Tommy was scrolling through her phone, pretending not to care. Grandpa continued, "Chief Adekunle, you've built wealth, but you've forgotten that wealth without wisdom is a curse. I watched how you treated your daughters. One with excess, the other with neglect." He looked at me then, and smiled gently. "But neglect sometimes builds strength." My heart thudded as he pulled out a set of documents from a folder. "I have rewritten my will. Everything, the estate, my savings, and my land, will go to Zara." The room froze. My mother gasped. My father stood abruptly, shouting, "Papa, that's impossible. Tommy is the firstborn." Grandpa slammed his cane on the floor. "Firstborn in pride, maybe, but not in purpose." Tommy's voice shook. "You can't do that. I'm your granddaughter too." He turned to her calmly. "You already had your $5 million. What did you do with it?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I gave Zara far less," he said, "and she built something that changed lives. That tells me who deserves my legacy." Silence filled the room. Only the ticking clock dared to speak. Finally, Grandpa turned to me. "Zara, promise me one thing, that you'll use this not for revenge, but for rebuilding. The Adekunle name must stand for something good again." Tears blurred my vision as I nodded. "I promise, Grandpa." He smiled faintly, and for a brief moment, peace washed over his wrinkled face. "Good," he whispered. "Then my work here is done." 3 weeks later, he passed away quietly in his sleep. The day of the will reading was chaos. My parents tried to contest it, but Grandpa had covered every legal angle. Even the lawyer warned them, "Chief, it's ironclad." When the court finally ruled in my favor, I didn't celebrate. Instead, I went to Grandpa's grave, placed fresh hibiscus flowers on the soil, and whispered, "I'll make you proud." But pride wasn't what came next. Guilt did. Because even though I had inherited everything, I couldn't shake off the image of Tommy's tear-streaked face when she realized it was all gone. That night, I called her. She didn't answer. Weeks later, I found out she had moved to London to start over. My parents followed soon after, their once proud empire now struggling without Grandpa's backing. I remained in Nigeria, continuing Women Rise. People praised me as the responsible daughter, but deep inside, I felt hollow. Grandpa's plan had worked, justice had been served, but at what cost? As I stood outside my new office one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold, I finally understood what Grandpa had meant about legacy. It wasn't about who had the money. It was about who used it with meaning. And though I had won, I realized that true victory wasn't inheriting wealth. It was earning peace. The months that followed were quiet. Almost too quiet. After Grandpa's funeral, our family mansion felt like a haunted house. The laughter, the arguments, the constant movement, all gone. My parents had sold part of their company shares to pay off debts Tommy's failed business had accumulated. They relocated to London to start fresh. But I knew the truth. They couldn't bear the shame of being known as the family whose patriarch gave his entire estate to the forgotten daughter. At first, I thought the silence would bring peace. But it brought questions instead. Every night, I replayed the final conversation I had with Grandpa, wondering if I had truly earned his trust or if I was just another pawn in a lesson he wanted to teach. My NGO, Women Rise, was growing faster than I'd imagined. We had 3 centers now, one in Enugu, another in Jos, and a small branch in Makurdi. Young women were finding purpose, independence, and hope. Each success story filled me with pride, but also guilt. Because every milestone reminded me of what my family had lost. One evening, I received an email that made my hands tremble. It was from Tommy. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I hesitated before opening it. Her words were short, but sharp, the kind that carried both pain and pride. "Zara, I know you think Grandpa did the right thing, but you don't know what I've been through since then. London isn't what I imagined. I've been working as a store clerk to survive. Sometimes, I can't even afford rent. I'm not asking for money. I just want to talk, sister to sister." I stared at the screen for a long time. The girl who used to flaunt designer bags and private jets was now struggling to pay rent. The thought broke something inside me. That night, I booked a flight to London. When I saw her at the cafe near King's Cross, I almost didn't recognize her. Her once perfect hair was tied back messily, her skin pale, her smile forced. "Zara," she whispered, standing up awkwardly before hugging me. For a moment, we both cried, the kind of tears that only siblings can understand. We sat down, sipping tea in silence before she finally spoke. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "I never did." She laughed bitterly. "You should have. I was cruel to you. I thought you were weak because you didn't fight for attention. But you won everything." "I didn't win," I said softly. "I just survived." She looked down, ashamed. "I used to think money could buy love. But when it was gone, I realized love was the only thing I couldn't afford." We sat there, letting the words linger between us like a fragile truce. Before leaving, she handed me a small box. "This was Grandpa's old pocket watch," she said. "He gave it to me when I was 12. I think he wanted you to have it." I opened it carefully. Inside the lid were engraved words I'd never seen before. "Wealth divides the blind, but love restores the sight." That night, I understood. Grandpa hadn't just wanted to teach my parents a lesson. He wanted to mend what they had broken, the bond between sisters. As my plane took off the next morning, I whispered a silent prayer for my family. Because in the end, legacy wasn't about inheritance. It was about forgiveness. Back in Abuja, the days grew slower, softer. The chaos that once ruled my life had quieted, replaced by the steady rhythm of purpose. Women Rise had become more than an NGO. It was now a family. Every woman who walked through our doors carried her own story of pain and resilience, and in helping them rebuild, I found myself healing too. But one evening, while sorting through old boxes in Grandpa's study, I discovered something that made my heart skip. It was a faded brown envelope marked, "For Zara, when you understand." Inside was a handwritten letter in his careful, slanted handwriting. "My dearest Zara, if you're reading this, then it means you have found peace in your heart, or at least, you are searching for it. I never gave you wealth to punish your sister. I gave you responsibility to test your heart. The world measures success in naira and dollars, but true success is measured in impact and compassion. I saw in you a strength your parents could not see, the kind that does not shout, but changes lives quietly. That is why I left you my estate. Not because you needed it, but because I knew you would multiply it for others. But remember this, if your sister ever returns to you in humility, do not turn her away. The Adekunle blood must learn unity again. Let forgiveness be the final legacy of this family. With love, Grandpa." Tears blurred the ink on the paper as I finished reading. His words weren't just a message. They were a commandment of love. 2 months later, I received another message from Tommy. This time, a video. She stood in a small London apartment, surrounded by art supplies. "Zara," she said, her voice trembling, "I've started painting again, the way I used to when we were kids. I'm selling some pieces to raise money for a small charity here. You inspired me. I just wanted to say, thank you." I smiled through tears. My sister, the girl who once lived for attention, was finally finding herself in the quiet things. I wired her some money to help with her art project, but I didn't tell her. I just left the transaction note signed with one word: legacy. Years passed. Women Rise became one of Nigeria's most recognized women empowerment programs, funded by local and international partners. I was invited to conferences, featured in magazines. The same people who once ignored me now called me an inspiration. But the day that meant the most was when Tommy returned home. She arrived at our training center unannounced, wearing a simple Ankara dress, no jewelry, no makeup, just a soft smile. "I came to help," she said. That day, we taught side by side, her guiding young women in art therapy sessions, me teaching entrepreneurship. For the first time in years, our laughter filled the room, echoing the way it once did when we were children chasing butterflies in Grandpa's garden. Later, as the sun set, we stood together under the same old palm tree that shaded Grandpa's grave. Tommy placed fresh hibiscus flowers on the soil, whispering, "You were right, Grandpa. We finally understand." I smiled, the wind brushing my face gently. Because in the end, Grandpa's greatest gift wasn't money, land, or power. It was wisdom, the kind that outlives us all. And as I looked at my sister beside me, at the women we'd helped, and at the quiet strength inside me, I finally realized. Grandpa's plan wasn't just about inheritance. It was about restoration. True legacy is not what we receive, but what we build with love, forgiveness, and purpose.